G and raising it over to the other side of the street to a second story, and that is a sharp, three-dimensionally higher than the rest of the notes. Than the rest of the rest of the notes. The notes that touch each other really are, as you can see by back here, they're really touching each other, right? They're exactly cut with a bunch of band saws at one time. They're cut in a certain angle. They all match in this angle right here. Okay, so we know that they're all together, but if you turn to the other side, there's been some glued tops that have made it a different color and also raised in the patterns of 2s and 3s on a keyboard. Those glued tops, or just those plastic molded pieces, those tops and plastic molded pieces are representing sharps, the sharp side of the street. The other side of the street are letters. So, KEYSongs. Okay, we're like, E is a very important note to find on the piano. It happens to be the top half. If you want an 88 grand piano, a wooden piano, like a piano that's wood, that's made out of wood, that's like this, wooden pieces with levers and springs and hammers and strings, which is a really cool thing. If that was 88 keys, it would go all the way from the bottom A all the way up to E and stop, and that would be halfway of the piano. And once you hit E, then from F all the way up to that very top note of high, super duper high, very high, super duper high, C, the highest C on the piano, 88 key piano, that happens to be 44 keys. So the middle of the piano is between E and F. I start on E. Teaching everyone where is E. How do you teach where E? You raised keys that are 2. There's 2 of them. Here are 3 houses, yards of a neighborhood, and they're called letters. Now these other notes, which are called sharp letters, their main distinction is they are raised off the plane. And to me, keyboard playing is a lot about touch and about feeling where those 3s and skis, the 3 notes and the ski notes, are, without even looking at the piano, by feeling them in between them and also feeling them, feeling the raisedness of their notes in between the 2. So when you feel the in between the difference between the 2 raised notes and the 3 raised notes. So I have 2, right, in this particular section that I'm talking about on the keyboard, 2 raised sharp letters, I call them, because they actually have a sharp sign next to them. One of them is D sharp. Okay, one of these 2. I have 2. I'm sorry, they're together. Name 2. Alright, so this little section of the keyboard we've talked about before, it's the ski section where there's 2, like skis, raised on the keyboard, and one of them happens to be called D sharp. Okay, we got the 2 skis, which are the 2 raised notes. They happen to be the color black on this keyboard, but they can be colored anything. In fact, I'd like to see a keyboard that almost all of the notes were either all a light color, instead of so distinctly differently in color, because it's the feel of the 2s and the 3s that's important, and it's the recognition that you can see the raisedness of those keys. Now, if you're playing on a tablet and everything's flat, and those keys are just filled in with a black slash there, well then you know that is okay, I understand, and you have to have that distinction. But if you can have a real keyboard, is what I'm talking about, and this, going from this, which is a grand piano which costs thousands of dollars, to this, which costs $200, is really easy to do. Pointer finger 2, 3, how you doing? 1, 2, 3. Swing your thumb under. Wank. You know why? Because you are on a 3-dimensional height. You are higher. Now, it brings the point. You could never then really do that fast are great if you're playing on a tablet flat plane, because you depend on the height. Keyboard players for centuries need the height of the sharp key in order to swing their thumb under. So you all that are trying to make us get away from that, you can't. You can at least make us buy something like in a MIDI key version like this, where at least the sharp is higher on the sharp side, right side of the street. Remember, the sharps are higher than the letters A, B, C, D, F, G, G, F, U, D, C, B, A. Oh yeah, the sharps. Oh yeah. Yep. What about that C sharp, that D sharp, that F sharp, that G sharp, that A sharp? What about that? That side versus the A, B, C, D, F, G, G, F, U, D, C, B, A, B. What is a distance? 1/2 step is each touching key on a keyboard. I hold these 5 keys in front of you. These 5 keys are touching each other on the keyboard and the grand piano. Believe me, they are. These grand piano keys are representing 1/2 steps. Bandsaws, all going at the same time. And then that piece of wood goes through it. Cuts 88 slabs of wood. And then they take plastic or ebony or well, first then they paint on the wood. Can you see this is painted? I don't want to break one of these off. You see this is painted? They paint on the wood where the sharps are going to go, because the sharps are so important to your sight. The sharps are something that makes something so fast, because your eyesight is going through the patterns of the threes and the skis. The threes and the skis are all what you see. 3 ski, 3 ski, 3 ski, 3 ski, 3 ski, 3. Anyway, this is still more important than you think. You could crawl all of these notes. You could crawl each one. By figuring out what notes feel like when you're going either sharp side of the street to letter side of the street, to sharp side of the street, to letter side. Yes, back and forth when you're in Chromatic City and you're playing every single note or every single possible house or yard or whatever that is on a street is what is in a city. That's what you're playing, every single one. You get a feel for how your brain receives the fact that you are not, when you're playing both hands at the same time, your brain is thinking, am I in the threes zone or am I in the ski zone? And I happen to be starting on D, right in the center of the skis, and I'm just walking out one note at a time away from each other, just feeling what it's like symmetrically to walk a space across the street, sharp, back on the other side of the street, back on the other side of the street, back to the other side of the street, and then the feel of when I do have, well, I'll show you. Here we go. Back to the other side of the street. Right here. The together yards that we don't cross the street. We stay on the same side of the street for that one little moment. Then we start crossing back and forth. G sharp. Then we reach it again. no joke intended, of possible ways to play sorry, I'm really sorry. To feel the feel of the keyboard without really looking at it. Remember before I was saying, oh, you know, if you could just feel the space, like pushing your fingers in between the threes and the skis, and what it feels like to be in there, and what it feels like to be suspended on all the sharp letters. So now we have like two feels. And that, you're thinking, well, also you have another feel, which is all the letters. You know, you go, remember yesterday we were saying, oh, it's fine to use whatever finger you want to do this with the keyboard? Okay? But it's not good to do that on the sharp side because of the glue, especially if it's an old piano. These are plastic tops that are just glued on a piece of wood. Notice that the wood has been painted black. So when they were manufacturing it, and they had this big piece of wood that they cut into all these little slabs, they knew to put raised, symmetrical plastic or ebony or rosewood or whatever pieces on top of the wood. They had to raise it because it's a three-dimensional instrument.